Daniel's here. Correctivity in systemic homeostasis, thereby autonomy and sovereignty for European genus and species. Okay, so we've got some matters to correct and elaborate on from recent podcasts of my own and of others around this cause of European advocacy, we might say. One correction is minor and kind of a funny one to begin with, but it's a mistake that I've made before, so I have to fix it this time finally. I referred to the cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin as Yuri Geller. Yuri Geller was the guy who bent spoons, and he had these trick spoons, and was proposed, going on the road as a some sort of magician, not to be confused with the so-called Russian cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin. Now, I had made the offered the clarification to some interlocutors on a stream that I was on with Equilux and Otto Pol and some other just nasty right wingers, and there's like a lot of nasty kids out there. I was suggesting that, so far as I know, Yuri Gagarin was not Russian, but he was in fact Belarusian, and that's what they began lambasting me and calling me a Polak for saying this. Is like, my God. Anyway, to make the point of the kind of company these guys keep. Anyway, the guy's name, the cosmonaut's name is Yuri Gagarin, not Yuri Gelin. Yuri Geller, the infamous bender of spoons. Now then, let's see how unpopular we can become by having the nerve to not adore Hitler, to recognize that the kosher folks are not European and not part of our interest group, to stand with most people in not being Christians or any other Abrahamic religion and not wanting it, and besides that, having the nerve to want to defend and preserve and foster our European kinds, whether in Europe or in diaspora. Isn't that so horrible? Now then, and please let me know how my sound is. What will be the next correction we'll set about? Well, Spencer Wells, the famous scientist, head of the Human Genome Project for National Geographic, has liked one of my tweets. And there's an interesting reason to take note of that. Not only because he's probably the most famous person who's shown any interaction with me on Twitter, besides Nora Bateson, perhaps. But I've used his statements of him coming from him as an example of scientism, egregious scientism. That is to say, bad science or bad application of science. Notably, where he has said that we're all Africans under the skin. Now, that is to render us as peoples far more the same and compatible than the reality would stand for, scientism aside. The 40,000 years of differentiation, the adaptations and mutations that would make us profoundly different. So, having made a showcase of him as the proprietor of this scientism, it was interesting to me that he would like and confirm a tweet that I made. He had made Spencer Wells had made a tweet that said the government, that is of Indonesia, has designated Lake Toba a super priority tourist destination, along with Likupang in North Sulawesi, Mandalika in West Nusa Tenggara, and Labuan Bajo in East Nusa Tenggara. Okay, and I just thought, because it bears straight upon his forte, which is tracing the Human Genome Project, I tweeted back, I commented, Lake Toba is formed of the caldera, that is the center of volcanic, in this case, supervolcanic eruption, from a supervolcano eruption some 75,000 years ago that nearly killed off all humans on Earth, reducing the population to a bottleneck under 10,000 people. Okay, so then you could say at that point, 75,000 years ago, and it was an Italian scientist who made this inference first, by the way. But at that point, 75,000 years ago, which seems to be the case, 74, 75, 76,000 years ago, something like that there was less than 10,000 people, possibly less than 5,000 people, then obviously we would have all been pretty similar. But that's a long time ago. And in evolutionary terms, I think that I have an agreement on my side that life evolves much more rapidly than was once thought. So 75,000 years of differentiation, 40,000 years in this case of European differentiation would make an enormous difference. Okay. And a warrantably assertable difference. operationally verifiable and profound. Which I guess I'm using the word warrant for a reason, because this warrantable assertability and operational verifiability, of course, I take as terms from the pragmatists, or the pragmatist John Dewey. Now, I'm not here to defend Dewey, and it always seems to be a problem with these right wingers and STEM types, that they think somehow because I take a few things from a philosopher, that I am somehow beholden to everything and responsible for everything they say, and bound to agree with everything they say. And it's simply not true. If I find something good and useful, I will take it from the given philosopher, whether I find other parts of their philosophy horrendous or not. Anyway, that aside, I will tend to use the word warrant, and in the most recent response to some comments that I'd made at Majority Rights that were being responded to in turn by James Bowery and guest worker there. Bowery is trying to come into some sort of as close to possible terminological accord with the way I'm talking. And it's a problem anytime these STEM types deal with the way you talk, because they're not sympathetic to the fact that you, as an I, am fine with a certain, and am good with a certain degree of ambiguity into the language, finding that actually serviceable in the reality of the social world, social interaction. They have this I'll call it fetishization of precision. It's that they're geared towards dealing with technology and equipment and hard sciences that has a more perfect causal connection, and this is what they want to see the social world in the same way, and to try to handle it in the same way. So anyway, one of the things that that Bowery said to me was that, oh, you use this word warranty with a Y on it, and that sounds to me like Kurt Doolittle, and it's good you have a dictionary there at DNA Nations, and you might be happier at dealing with him, or or with the Eastern European philosopher, Eastern European intellectuals like he is used to dealing with, or something like this. As opposed to talking to people at Majority Rights. Well, first of all, I don't use the word warranty. I use the word warrant, as in this is warranted. Something is warranted. It's a good and useful word, again, that I got from Dewey's usage and others other who would be apprised of that sort of pragmatist philosophy. And I need to be clear that I have not been influenced by Kurt Doolittle whatsoever. And never looked at his stuff. And was never much interested in his stuff. There was a time when he was being promoted by some other guy, and it was like, and there was a lot of dicey stuff about him. So I might have put up a few articles in which it was discussed, but I've never been interested in him. Bowery's tried to encourage me to go elsewhere, not understanding that I don't like going to majority rights, because I know that I'm going to be that guest worker and is basically just going to straw man me. And Bowery too, maybe not quite as bad, but they're just going to misrepresent what I say. But I go there in order to correct exactly what I need to in order to correct their straw manning of things that I've brought to bear, if they're going to do that. And it's interesting to me that that Bowery and guest worker as these guys who are both STEM types, STEM being science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Ten Staffel being that way too, who I've talked about and will again in a minute in order to clarify something further. That Bowery would try to talk about the underpinnings of my philosophical outlook of this platform as something alien to him, Eastern European, or maybe just not Northern European, something like this. And but what at any rate, kind of like something alien a bit. And well, if Aristotle, if you want to look upon Aristotle as Eastern, something Eastern, and then I guess maybe, but most normal people and the normal historical outlook is to treat Aristotle as quite European. And even in the case of Heidegger, who guest worker tries to parcel out and make the pretty much the only worthy philosopher by himself, going so far as to say Aristotle simply isn't relevant. It was one of the stupidest things I've ever heard. One of the mistakes that they're making, that Bowery is making, that guest worker is making, that Ten Staffel is making, at these STEM people, along with kind of to some extent, I think misdirected a bit by McDonald. I have to go back and refresh on McDonald. I've mostly skimmed his texts. I know what I know from McDonald, mostly from audio, but it's pretty clear that they're paying short shrift to Aristotle and the wisdom of Aristotle, and this is an epistemological blunder that they're making, in the same way, that Hitler did. That is to say, they are not observing the qualitative difference of what Aristotle calls praxis, the social world. Um, it's not the same as the world of physics, where there's like hard cause and effects, strict or more strict cause and effects. This is what they want. This is what their Cartesian anxiety is doing to them in response to kosher rhetoric and language games. It's understandable reaction. It was my first reaction to want to do perfect science and find pure warrant in response to this stuff. Uh, but it's an epistemological blunder when applied to the social world as Aristotle would observe. Now, I said last time, this is one of the things that I was eager to correct when talking about Ten Staffel, that, you know, these guys who, well, a STEM type like him, first of all, is in the habit of looking for the one thing that breaks the circuitry, and sort of parsing out all other variables, and so of course that becomes for him a proneness to single out the JQ as something you solve that and you solve everything, right? Kind of outlook. That also unburdens to some extent the guilt of being, maybe that he might suffer from being, partly German and having, this. If the kosher folks are the every problem, then it makes it would make Hitler seem almost justified, but it's not enough. It doesn't diagnose the problem of this epistemological blunder, the misunderstanding of praxis, enough to leave it just at that. You've also got to go into the fact of things that Aristotle observes, for example, that human nature, humans' ability, we are different from lower creatures, and from the abstract cause and effect, the sheer abstract cause and effect of the harder sciences, in that we can learn and we can change, and that actions upon us, policies upon us, have reflexive effects, making us at least a bit less perfectly predictable than perhaps STEM types might like in their overvaluation of precision, at least as it would apply to, as they'd like to apply it to the social world. They seemingly would like the social world to work like a machine engine or something. Aristotle observes further that not only do we, that's going a bit further along in terms of sophistication that we can learn on a more even basic biological level. We are biological. So unlike the world of forces and impacts, unlike the world even of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where one level of needs is maximized in favor, and then we move on to the next, and then the next, in lineal progression. We are, as biological creatures, evolved for optimal need satisfaction, and not maximal. And of course, insufficiency is toxic as well. Now, it's in the context of the optimality to which we are born, and that sets the basic parameters of Aristotelian framework. That the word toxicity becomes prominent. It's been appropriated in popular culture and mocked by right wingers for. Whereas I think that that's a disservice to our cause, because optimality and toxicity are an excellent are excellent parameters to talk to help gauge our homeostasis. That is, homeostasis, of course, meaning self-corrective system as a people. Now then, then Aristotle would go on to say, not only are we mammals, but we are not only are we biological, we are mammals. That is to say, we care about relationships. So that's going to have a gravity that in many cases outweighs what would appear to be the sequence of lineal progression. Again, making predictability difficult for those who want to apply hard scientific measures to the social world. Now, this is where I might tip my hat to Keith Woods for something good. I doubt very much that it's an original thought, but on his part. But where he says that nationalism, let's say ethno-nationalism, provides a means, a strong motivation to transcend selfish material obsession, and I think that that's true, and that would be connected with a shared commitment, not only expecting it of yourself, but recognize that others recognize this responsibility too. It makes it a lot easier to delay immediate material satisfaction and to look upon and to be subservient enough to a higher cause. Anyway, so we're beginning to see how Aristotle becomes pivotal in the matter of correctivity, and this is where, in recentering praxis, that is to say, our group system, as opposed to the modernist Cartesian estrangement, whether beyond nature or within nature, within being Locke most salient, and beyond being Descartes in his Archimedean points. Beginning with Vico in response to Descartes, and then and progress through Nietzsche to Heidegger, you have the postmodern hermeneutic term, which is recentering, which is correcting this epistemological basis of Aristotle and recentering praxis, our group as the center outlook, not as opposed to the relative interests of our group as the what I call the calibration, the gauge, and objectivist quests, which have been the hallmark of modernity. The prejudice against prejudice, as Gadamer called it, objectivity, and the pursuit of, quote, truth and facts. Alignment of people with nature to the point of natural fallacy, even, or pursuit of some God idea, abstract principles beyond nature. These things, which obviously the right wingers, being herded along by millennial warts and so on, they're not getting that these quests, these into truth and logic and so on, these objectivist quests are meant to be feedback and not who we are. Absurdly, they're not meant to be our identity. Our antagonists, those people who don't care about our group, want that to be our identity, though. And it's very much resonant with Christianity. This purity spiral, but more so now since 2008, with a marketing campaign, a characterology of the left, having whites in particular chase these red capes of their own exaggerations and anti-European stuff in social group advocacy, which is the essence of what's called the left, is group advocacy against elitist oppression. And the right-wing argument against that extreme, against abuses of that group advocacy is, of course, objectivism. Well, we are on top because, that's natural fact, it's God's will, what have you. And these are convenient arguments, particularly for the kosher folk following as of 2008. And they've got every stupid F-head ever since going right along with this. Somehow they're all snookered in in Morgoth's own words, they doubled down. Well, he's the one doubling down in this identity and in this chasing of the red capes. Rams Paul is doubling down. So, the lefties, the left, not appreciating that, indeed, the depth grammar of the left is unionization, is group advocacy as the way to defend against might makes right arguments, and that's just the way it is. Truth, pseudo-objectivist arguments. of course, you know, this Iranian guy, academic agent, was English mother. He's Iranian, and is going along with the program, and he's got this you know semi-stupid interlocutor on his last show, Endeavor, who's living in Petersburg, and they're going right along with this characterology of the left, and I think I don't even know, sure, I don't think that they're aware that e-celebrity, they might not be fully aware that e-celebrity is playing more a part in what they're doing than they realize. Why they would go along with this coloring book of the left as enemy. Now, in this coloring book, in this story, this framework that all these right wingers and these third positionists are buying into, the left is doesn't deal with reality. It doesn't deal with nature. It doesn't deal with facts. It doesn't deal with ultimate truths beyond nature, God, whatever, religion, blah blah blah. And they're not okay. Now, if you were to say that these are the abuses, distortions, and anti-white weaponizations of international Marxism, workers of the world, quote, unite against national regimes and break their boundaries and the borders, rather, and cultural Marxists, people of color and gays and just whatever unite against the borders and boundaries of European peoples. That yes, that is. But this is what they're talking about, and it's true. This is what I've been trying to help. I'm trying to help them, not just save face, but and to some extent save their work. I'm not saying that they have to flush their efforts in their years now of railing against the left. Just it needs to be said that they are talking about this kind of left, which, okay, is a liberalization of our borders and bounds. It seeks to break our union. But that is to say, it's not our left. It's not a left of our people. It's not a unionization, a group advocacy for our people, which would be the opposite of liberalism. It would be toward conserving. And I hate when people say, what are we conserving? Or say that conservatism is bad. Well, we're trying to, yes, we are trying to conserve our genetics. Thank you very much. So don't be stupid and ask, what are we trying to conserve? That's dumb. We're trying to conserve our people and advance our people. So anyway, people like Academic Agent and Endeavor, all these right wingers, all the ones that have appeared on Millennial Warts Yuletide thing, they're all intelligent. They all have good things to say that you can pick up on, and they're all on a basic level screwing up in some very important ways. And one thing that I've been keen to note of Academic Agent and Endeavor is going right along with this ridiculously, is when he says that, oh, it's he has this thing, and it sounds right. He calls the boomer truth regime. It's really obnoxious. It sounds like a meme right out of some kosher marketing firm from Madison Avenue. Exactly. And he's trying to say, oh, the boomers have all made Hitler and Nazism into the ultimate bogeyman. Well, it's not the boomers who did this in particular, or across the board. Kosher ones, of course, and maybe some others. And well, not quite a boomer, more of an Xer, but I would say that it's not necessarily a big mistake and shouldn't be a big problem for advocates of European peoples to still say that he was about as bad as anybody for us, including Stalin, right up there. Do you want to argue that Stalin was just as bad? Okay, maybe you can, but is that a reason to kind of lighten the critique of Hitler as someone who's not good for European peoples? Absolutely not. But what's worse with what this Iranian guy, academic agent, is doing and imposing his Johnny-come-lately view on European advocacy is that he's not somehow appreciating that while that might have been true on the mainstream media, on the kosher-controlled media, that Hitler was, assured to be considered the ultimate bogey, within the purview of WN, there's been an opposite problem. That it's hard to be even critical of Hitler. It's hard to say the obvious that, Operation Reinhardt, the special targeting of Jewry, is a reality. Gas chambers were a reality. And that the Nazis were a horrific scourge on 50 million, killing 50 million Europeans and destroying so much of Europe besides. In other words, not good for European peoples, and not an issue. And so it's absurd, And here's academic and agent and Endeavor, trying to like poo-poo this. Oh, they would have called us Nazis. It's so funny. They're taking this kind of attitude, like, oh, it's so important that we lessen this in its ranks of evil. Then you got Endeavor. He's living in Petersburg, for crying out loud, which was encircled by the Nazis. And how many people died there as a result of starvation? A million Russians. And he's going to say, oh, well, Nazism was, they think that Nazism was really bad. Endeavor, you're an idiot. And you really should shut up. And to take and to take Endeavor's idiocy further, he's going along with this idea, with this, and this is all kosher steering, because they want to maintain right-wing identity. They want to maintain the association with Hitler. And they're playing right, and this Iranian guy, academic agent and Endeavor, going right along with it. But they're going along with another thing that's a subtler, irritating right wing reaction that the kosher folks want to encourage. That is to say, not only ignoring the profound underlying motive of the hippies, which was being Dasein, their being, and Mitdasein, being amidst their people, for men, let's say white men, being amidst their people. Um, but seeing that as, but blame, allowing for them to be blamed for the wrong turn uh, in our society, in our civilization, when in fact, now here, this is the important point. They were inarticulate. So you have Endeavor saying they were inarticulate for a reason, because as I've said, this was being and being amidst your people. This is a matter of, this is going in the opposite direction of the traditional trajectory of men, of necessity, of correction for the sake of optimality and philosophical realignment. We had been thrown into wars, and this Vietnam War, most graphically, expending young men for no clear and imminent danger to our borders and boundaries. They called upon rebellion, but it's not only stigmatic for males to turn away, it's stigmatic in the traditional sense, to turn away from the conventional call for war and the rewards, the potential rewards of upward mobility, just direct approach to upward mobility in America. Thanks, man. Sounds good. So that made it hard to articulate for one thing. Another thing that made it hard to articulate was that you're talking about in being an organic synthesis, not the analytic way of looking at things that would be given to eloquence and articulation. And again, it was incommensurate with the feminist agenda, which was going in the other direction, toward the top of the hierarchy of motives that was held to be necessary for liberation of women. And it was also dangerously and awkwardly incommensurate with black civil rights, which were toward the middle of the hierarchy of motives, having just normal integrity and, at least ostensibly, and black power, which again would be toward the top of the hierarchy. So articulating these motives in contrast to those things would have been awkward at best as well. So in grand sum, and then you've got affectations like Herbert Marcuse, in his idea of free love, which would not be uh, a part of being for men. This would be an affectation. This would be uh, not conducive to the best interests of males and being amidst their people. Of, you can say being left alone, because that's when males from everywhere are just competing for women that would potentially be your appropriate wife. This is not being. Again, you would have to be prepared to take on the profoundest tenets of Americanism at that time, when it had just, won World War II along with the Soviets. Perhaps even be prepared to criticize the kosher folks, which was near impossible at that time. I mean, that was the greatest taboo. The last thing you want to do. You'd have to criticize rights and the human potential movement to be all you could be, and the pursuit of happiness in America and wealth. So, in sum total, the hippies were inarticulate. And so when stupid Endeavor says, "Oh, there's Neil Young saying these things critical of Joe Rogan," and it just goes to show how fake it all was. No, it goes to neither I nor anybody else should be defending the hippies themselves as spokesmen, not even for their underlying cause. None of them were articulate of it. This was never my point. I'm not going to defend Neil Young or any of these guys. They're idiots. Good musicians, a lot of them, but political idiots. And but when Endeavor says, "Oh, it goes to show how fake it is," he is sounding exactly like Iggy Pop, the kosher guy who sort of came up at that time and was like, sort of like kind of in line with the punk thing, which was, just like, let's make a new fashion statement and mix things up and help to gloss over what was profound about the hippie stuff, the essence of it being for white men, knit the same for white men, recognizing intrinsic value to white men, so that they're not so intrinsically valueless as to be, just sent off to some corporate war for Michelin Corporation or whatever, for tire rubber, or to take for an American corporation to take over the tire rubber industry from Michelin Corporation there in Vietnam, and so on. So then, you have these people, inarticulate and easily taken advantage of, and pawning off this misrepresentation of the times as about free love, about civil rights, uh, about feminism, about drugs. Well, drugs, yes, that was part of it, but um, that wasn't the essence. It was just a part of rebellion against this tradition and habit of war, of considering men so intrinsically valueless as to have to go to war, to be drafted into Vietnam. Um, Again, it's not to say that men shouldn't be expected to uh, defend their people if the borders and boundaries are indeed being attacked. Yes, of course. And obviously sooner and with more requirement than women. Not saying that. But just not sheer habit and tradition to where they're called upon to go to war, whether it's really necessary or not. And of course, and if so that the point being that they are aligning when they make hippies the issue, they align with these stupid right wing women. Um, they they are aligned with kosher interests, which would like very much to obfuscate that important underlying motive. Um, to the hippies. Again, not defending their manifest exponents, whether it's the Beatles in Hard Day's Night, mocking the war generation or right wingers, what have you. Though that was inarticulate but valid criticism of the the presumed legitimacy of the habit of war. Anyway. So we've talked about Spencer Wells, we talked about academic agent, and yeah, so, and I want to come back to how this so-called boomer regime, or a boomer truth regime that the Iranian guy academic agent wants to try to promote, oblivious to the decades-long problem, the albatross of saddling white nationalism with association with Hitler and Nazism, not understanding that way overly sympathetic view towards that stuff has been the problem. Not too much guilt. This goes to show that he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Iranian Johnny come lately, trying to impose his celebrity on us, and he'll get I don't know how many more views and likes than I get. I don't even care at this point. I really don't. My concern is to get things right, and well, I am right and he's wrong. An exaggerated vilification of Hitler is not the problem. Not within, and certainly not within the purview of white advocacy. quite the opposite. And him and Endeavor are playing right into that. Even Rams Paul is botching this terribly. As he, him and Sasha continue with the, the lefties, yeah, and then he wants to act like, they're gonna call everybody a Nazi. Nobody cares anymore. He doesn't understand because he's not been involved in this for a long enough time, and he's not taking the important issues seriously enough that it is a problem. And there are people who deserve to be called neo-Nazis, and it is something that shouldn't be shrugged off. These people need to be. It needs to be explained how they're mistaken and how they are not in concert with the best interests of European peoples, with our advocacy. So, I mean, there's, I really like Norvin and so on, and the people that he associates with they're quite clever. They have some good things to say, but there's that millennial internet bubble that they're wrapped up in. I was listening to his show yesterday, and some guy was saying, who is it that's saying Nazis are bad? Was it that Daniel Sienkiewicz guy? It's like as if identifying Hitler as pejorative is a wrong thing to do. As if I'm the one who's somehow dragging things down. And you got people there who still want to deny the Holocaust, even though you don't need to, in order to defend yourself. These right-wing bubbles that the true problematic boomer truth regime, that is to say the right-wing boomer truth regime, the Hitlerists, are feeding. That's the problem. That this Iranian guy, academic agent, should be addressing. And Endeavor, sitting there in Petersburg, making light of Hitler and all this stuff, while sitting there in Petersburg, where the Nazis killed like a million Russians. Oh, it's so funny that they want to call us Nazis. That the Nazis were. They want to say that the Nazis were so bad. Yeah, it's so funny. Norton shows how I found you several years ago. Well, I don't know. Have I been talking to Norton for several years? Might be. It's at least a couple. I don't know. I don't know if several is the right word, but that's cool. I like Norvin. I just wish that somehow he could get out of this. He could encourage his cohorts to really put off Hitler for the epistemological blunder that he was, and certainly not do stupid stuff like venture talk of violence, deny the Holocaust. There's a general. I mean, even where they acknowledge it, this is where I have to ask for some help, because why I don't think that anybody of this generation should be made to feel guilty about uh, either Hitler or the people he killed, whether it's Jews or Europeans. And I don't think that they should be penalized. We've all been penalized enough, more than enough. There's another extreme, and I don't know the right word for it. Maybe somebody can help me. I don't think that it's going to do any. It's going to be particularly effective to call someone like Patrick Bateman insensitive, or other people insensitive when they even Greg Johnson. It's like, I don't care. When talking about the Holocaust or something, I don't care. Even if they acknowledge it, I don't care. There's a way. There's a certain. I don't have the word felicity. You just okay. You don't feel guilty, but you don't have to be. Is the word gratuitously? You don't have to be contemptuous either. Shouldn't be, if you want to show yourself as a human being worthy of trust and respect for your judgment. Like I said, even saying that much, I'm walking on the eggshells of being sensitive and like overly sensitive and obsequious. I don't think it's probably not that hard to get the right word, but it's just that some people don't unburden themselves of guilt in a judicious way. When just first of all, there's no reason to feel guilty about things that it had nothing to do with. And I'm not saying you should, but I'm not going to join anybody in a denial of things that there's just so much evidence now. It's just ridiculous. And I'm not going to tactlessly join in people who see calls to violence, let alone genocide, as the order of the day. I can understand, in the first place, people who have these sentiments and wishes. Your foot stomped on, you're getting abused with political correctness. It's outrageous. And particularly in the days before internet, when you had the totally controlled media, the three networks and newspapers and whatnot, and you had no voice. It might seem that the only voice were, acts of violence. And those are the days of Metzger and first generation WN. But it's not like that anymore. Now we do have voice, even if it's obfuscated. We still have some capacity, with tact, to make our advocacy known, to make our wish to pursue our sovereignty, and to chart our sovereignty and autonomy. Now we have that capacity. So we have the voice, which futile acts of terrorism would have been uh, the proxy expression of at one time. Later on, when we have our people organized, then we might be able to talk about criminal prosecutions, but we're nowhere near that yet. Or you can try that, but still, the priority at this point is charting our autonomy, and that's done through the DNA nations concept. That's the way I'm going to do it, and the concept of unionization, which is the essence of leftism, as applied for the interests of our people. And I don't mean industry; I mean unionization of our people. And that doesn't become an obsolete concern or an obsolete union the way some industrial unions can become. I'm glad that Norvin agrees with most of what I said. Like I said, I like Norvin. It's just that, as I said, he said it's unfortunate these come up through this right wing company, and I've explained how they're a problem. And I hope that he can, for his own sake, shed the worst of that company or get them somehow to come to their senses. Because if he gets somewhere, it could be in trouble with that stuff, and or conflict with other Europeans for no reason. So I wish Norvin the best. I like him, and I find him very intelligent in many ways. Okay, so what else did I want to talk about? Oh yes, now Todd Lewis. And I have some sense that maybe he's getting wind of some things that I'm talking about, and the terminological disputes that I'm having over at Majority Rights, among other things. Wanting to see, for example, me wanting to note the depth grammar of the left as a matter of unionization and coalitions thereupon, not a matter of equality, inequality, which is what the kosher folks want us to do. And the intransigence of the STEM boomers, like guest worker and just the whole range of people that used to call themselves the alt-right and now call themselves the dissident right and things like that, or third positionists. I'm sure that Todd Lewis is overhearing some of these disputes over terminology, and he's a Christian, so he's in league with other Christians who are not going to be too keen on my stance with regard to Christianity. But that's besides the point. He was discussing terminology and Plato's discussion of it in his last show, and I just thought it'd be interesting to mention that they used the example of justice, that, problem with terminology, they say, is that people are not, they don't have an agreement on these terms. Well, justice is an interesting example because there are at least two important different applications or kinds of justice, uh, and which can cause a moral conflict. For example, one kind of justice is the justice of uh, needs. That is to say, you deserve something because you need it more than another person, so that you have the chance to do things. And then there's another kind of justice, which is a justice where people uh, gain resources because of their merit and efforts. Um, so that and those two different kinds of justice make for some interesting conflicts to look at. But I just wanted to mention that because they didn't, in saying that there were different kinds of justice. And, well, they're not exactly treading new ground. And again, Bowery's concern over my terminology, and guest workers. Well, guest workers never going to admit to anything. He's never going to say anything that I say is going. He's going to say it's bad, it's wrong, it's this, it's that. He's going to misrepresent it. But they have, generally speaking, they have a wish to an overly precise definition of terms, which is not my aspiration personally. Ordinary usage is good enough. So when I say warrant, I mean, when I talk about warrant, it is, I mean, this is warranted. So it's warrantably assertable to say that European peoples are a genus, and we have species of the different ethnicities within European peoples, and this is verifiable. It's foundational enough that our scientists, geneticists, have done great work in discerning the haplogroups. Is it absolutely unassailable and incontestable as 1,000% as a distinct group? No, but it's warrantably assertable enough. Does it need just like endless foundationalizing at this point by guest worker? Absolutely not. He's absurd. And our distinction is clear enough, and we are warranted in asserting this, and we have, quote, foundation enough that our interests are discreet and worth defending. The same, and by the same token, we are warranted to say that the kosher folks are a different people, that they are they have different interests, typically indifferent, if not antagonistic. Why that is, well, there could be different reasons, but it's certainly a valid working hypothesis to say that not only are there different people, but there are people that we have to watch for the sake of our defense, whether they have they're still motivated to not trust and in fact attack us for the Holocaust, which we had nothing to do with anyway, or whatever. Certainly, there's been antagonism that goes back well before that. We're satisfied that they are a discrete group, and provided we make it clear that we're not denying the Holocaust, that we're not trying to kill them, let alone genocide them, or exploit them even, that we are on warranted moral ground to see them as a separate people, a distinct people, to pursue our autonomy from them, and to defend ourselves, which includes being critical of them. Now, it's important, this is another reason to not allow Colin Liddell to do what he's doing. Because Colin Liddell has tried to say with what's his name from Australia? The English Navy guy from Australia. Anyway, Colin Liddell is trying to say that there's two kinds. There's people who are, who love Hitler and blame the kosher folks for everything, and there's like, quote, reasonable people like him who think that there might be some bad ones, and there might be some some cases where Israel is overcompensating, and they might have a little bit too much influence in this, that, or the other niche, but really that's not the big problem. That's not the biggest problem. It's not whatever. It's greatly exaggerated, and anybody thinks that it's a real problem is a Nazi. And he's got, obvious glow in the darks like Brett Stevens working for him. It just, maybe he thinks that, you got to make a living or something. I don't know what Colin Liddell's problem is, but you can make this distinction. You can be critical of the kosher folks and see them as importantly other, a difference to maintain. A crucial difference to maintain, and a vigilance to maintain, near first, if not first, and not be a neo-Nazi, and not be absolutely critical of Hitler and Nazism. Now, again, I've tried to tease out how it is that this platform that I've set out is the superior platform, the correct platform for advocating European peoples. As our concern is a postmodern concern of not getting caught into in the Cartesian anxiety of overreaction to seek pure warrant, whether beyond nature or within nature, might makes right, like Hitler, or beyond nature, like Descartes, or some Jesus person or something. But in fact, to take the hermeneutic turn, which is synonymous with the postmodern turn, that Heidegger was taking, with clues from Vico and other forebears, into a process of homeostasis, which is not anti-science, but which is not scientistic, which is critical of scientism, that is bad application of science or bad science, like Spencer Wells was guilty of when he said that we're all just Africans underneath the skin. Hermeneutics would allow us to be critical of that kind of scientism. It does allow us to be critical of that kind of scientism, and to liberate us from mere facticity, as Heidegger puts it. Because Heidegger was using both anti-Cartesian perspectives, that of emergentism and hermeneutics. But hermeneutics allows for the liberation from mere facticity, which is very important. That's what allows us not only to move into coherence as individuals and group out of the arbitrary flux of the empirical world in which we're thrown, which can mix us up to no end if we don't have some sort of autobiographical and group narrative rules to follow, historical perspective to take into account, systemic perspective to take into account, that helps us to transcend moments of contradiction, episodes of challenge which do not show us up at our best, relationships which are not close personal relationships which don't turn out to be favorable, and into a connection with the profundity of our group pattern, also transcending contradictions, paradoxes, strange loops, charmed loops, dilemmas. This is what autobiography and narrative can do. Now, okay, people who don't like us, who don't care about us, have abused these notions, and these are the red capes that they're all chasing. Oh, they want to say it's all narrative. They want to say it's all a social construct. These idiot right wingers, they refuse to understand that this is an abuse of these concepts. It's a contradiction of their very non-Cartesian mandate. In the moment you say, or one might try to say, that they can make of themselves whatever gender, whatever identity that they like. That's Cartesian. That's not dealing with reality. And that's not what the social constructionist mandate was about, or the hermeneutic mandate was about. That's not what the postmodern turn was about. It was to bring us back from that Cartesian estrangement and into engagement with the reality. Yes, the socially infused reality and factually infused reality of our system, of our of our of our species. Now, again, this is not, when we're talking of social constructionism, this is a postmodern corrective to the individualist starting point of Cartesianism. I think, therefore I am, as opposed to this third world panorama of behaving creatures that I'm looking at. And to observe the interactive source of what individuality that we have, and to be respectful of that, and the social nature at the core of our being and our onset. It's not, however, to deny our corporeal distinction or the necessity of the hermeneutic necessity of autobiography, to have what Heidegger would call to be authentic to ourselves, to our people, and to be coherent in our overall path as the first requirement of any individual in the world, certainly of any European. We need a significant alternative range of functional autonomy as individuals, but that requires group borders and boundaries. And the last comment at Majority Rights was observing that that land borders are obviously important to maintain, but I don't mean just that. I'm always doing a double entry when I talk about what it takes to preserve our species, and boundaries in the sense of group membership through our unionization are, so in a far-reaching and even more important way to maintain, let's say, the matter of citizenship, birth certificates, marriage licenses, social security number, that sort of thing. Okay, so what else did I want to talk about here? I mean, the things that these right-wing reactionaries, the STEM type, like guest worker would try to say when I talk about a union, is doing like this. Is in reaction similar in a way as Semiagog. It's just so desperate for a physical thing, white knuckle, to cling on to. It can't handle the thought of metaphor or any ambiguity whatsoever, any sort of the least bit arbitrary. So When I talk of a union, this is like an offensive to the. He thinks that I'm talking about. What does he say? The the uh, the being. Uh, oh, you're talking about the being of our peoples when you talk about the union. You're trying to talk about the being of our people. No, I'm not. I'm talking about I'm talking about a border and a boundary to group membership. You know, inclusion or not. That's what I'm talking about. You could say um, it's the being. It comes the border comes into being with unionization, just like when Heidegger says that uh, uh, language comes into being with writing. You could say the border comes into being with membership, but not. I mean, it's not. It's not the being of the group. Or that's not what it, that's not what, what I was trying to do with it. Might even have a little bit to do with that, but that's not what I meant. Um, Other problems for STEM people. I talked about that. It's not just that they're focusing on one thing, but they are not. That they're having a hard time accepting the fact that human beings are agentive, a bit changeable. They learn and can learn to learn, and there's reflexive effects and interaction, which make it not quite make the social world of praxis not quite function the way they would want it to in their like for their perfect theory. And Aristotle would advise against that. He would say yes, that it doesn't work that way, and therefore you've got to be a bit more modest and go for what he calls phronesis, that is to say practical judgment, working hypotheses, and specificatory structures, like that. Um, that doesn't mean you can't, through those means, come to, again, warranted assertability and operational verifiability. You can. You can be quite scientific about it. Just not like the world of physics. Not to the extent that they might like. Uh, Now, so guest workers taking great umbrage with my use of the term specificatory structures. Ow, my back. I seated in a bad position. Okay, that's better. The specificatory structures, Schotter's is talking about how we negotiate, we conjointly construct our understanding of reality, and in fact, reality. Getting even more radical about it. One person is taking from their experience and their emergent capacities. They're putting out a partly finished set of ideas, chainwork of ideas, and then the other person acts into that, shaping it and crafting it. They're coming to a shared understanding, a joint construction of what this is about and how it goes, a logic of meaning and action. That is, I mean, I guess we could call, and I'm sure that guest worker would try to say that I would accuse me of saying that the European race is a specificatory structure. Well, yeah, you could. I could call it that, but that I wouldn't tend to do that. The idea of specificatory structure is supposed to be more of a focus on first of person to person negotiation. Whereas they would eventually arrive at something more like theory or a working hypothesis, let's say, which is still a bit modest. I mean, I don't think that it's too bold to put the existence of European people on a theoretical level, on a sound theoretical level, as extant, warrantably assertable, operationally verifiable. Okay, so the next thing. How the red cape is working in this article. Oh, I had noticed problem in an Occidental Observer article that they were chasing. Who was the article by? It was by Tobias Langdon. He was chasing and he was talking about how some black had literally picked up as in lifted a drunken white woman and brought her to some place and raped her. And he concludes the article by saying, leftists have built their power on sand, and floods of upheaval and conflict are coming throughout the Western world. Great will be the fall of leftism. After that, our job will be to rebuild the West on firm foundations, the rock of reality and recognition of racial difference. Well, I'm talking about how left, so he's going with this altercast by the kosher folks of the right wing, you see, as objectivist and truth and leftist. He doesn't say it, but it's like this, like kind of like sheer narrative, this red caping of, because he doesn't even recognize it as a group advocacy. But before that, the paragraph before that, he's quoting, he's saying, but the foundations are decisive in the end, as this parable by Jesus points out. Therefore, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man which built his house upon a rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon that house. And it fell not, for it was founded upon rock. 7:26. And everyone that heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them not shall be likened unto the foolish man which built his house upon sand. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon the house, and it fell. And see, do you see how he's being, Tobias Langdon, as smart as he is being led back into the Abrahamic jurisdiction, the Abrahamic yoke of Christianity, and saying, and this more recent red cape of a characterology of the left that's really kicked into full gauge marketing campaign as of about 2008 with the subprime real estate Boston bailout that left the kosher folks in their hegemony uh, greater than ever, and needing more than ever to be on guard against the backlash of leftist slash unionized advocacy against their elitist abuse, uh, whether in their niches, media, government, banking, finance, academia, law and courts, international business, organized crime. NGOs goes with international business. Well, it's forgetting one. Oh, religion, of course, is the other one. That's from the top down. And then you have, from the bottom up, their biological patterns, which are reconstructing a different biology, their interests, which are different. That's enough. They're different from ours, from Europeans. And this reaction against the left and into Christianity is bringing them into alignment with their interests at this point. Okay. Something more I wanted to say about our being born unfinished. That we are not physically and sexually mature upon birth, even while our individual and species DNA does have emergent trajectory. We're not equipped. We're not equipped linguistically and conceptually with all we need, all we will need from the social environment. And in the hermeneutic realm, and it's important to understand. I tried to discuss this with Kevin McDonald, and to no avail. And with guest worker, forget about it. It's just, that's hopeless. But it's not, the hermeneutic realm is not only necessary to understand for how it can and has been abused against us with the misuse of language, with the abuse of concepts, with and narrative, and the absurd abuse of it in the sense of proposing things that are really not possible and not realistic. And like I said, the kosher folks have used it to red cape so many important issues. So it's not only necessary to understand how to stave off these things, which would misdirect our emergent qualities in their trajectory. Which Heidegger would advise correctly that, generally speaking, we'd want to hold fast to. But Heidegger, at his best, would also be saying that we need that hermeneutic realm in liberation from the arbitrary facticity that our enemies would take advantage of. Looks at the slight arbitrariness of the boundaries of our people that we're thrown into, so that we can adhere to our emergent trajectory, but also, coherently so in our autobiography and in our group narrative. Maintain our genetic capital and social capital and species ecology, in pervasive ecology. That hermeneutic capacity, which is not merely our distinct human capacity for language, but also for concept and analysis. That is to say, it's not only necessary for telling fictional stories, which might be inspiring and diversion, or they might be semi-fictional in order to get us past a setback. And say, the example typically given is what the English always lose the first battle, but wind up winning in the long run. Even if it doesn't always work out that way, it's a good, inspiring narrative to go along with. But it's also necessary to tell nonfiction stories, at least a coherent one, to make sense of life. It's critical that our people understand this postmodern hermeneutic term. So that it's not just our enemies weaponizing it against us and twisting us up in language games. You'll notice that these people, Rams, Paul, whomever, were buying into this marketed characterology of the left, are always saying, it's like, oh, these leftists, they have these narratives that they want to say. Whereas we believe in the truth, and we believe in facts, and we believe in nature, and we believe in God, and principles beyond nature. We want to be in harmony with our inborn nature, with our corporeality. We want it to be not in harmony. We want to adhere to it as much as possible within reason, but not below its human function, not on an animal level, um, not on a sheer animal level, without moderation from our higher faculties. And the same goes with our group. We want to harmonize well enough and be in concert with group group nature and homeostasis, our system, and its relation to environment. Furthermore, we don't want to be looking to subhuman nature for strict guidance. And this is where these scientific fuckheads are going off the rails, whether it's Hitler or the true boomer truth regime, who think that him and other scientific reactionaries have really got it perfectly figured out. And we're the ones who don't know what we're talking about. So that is to say, you don't want to go to that Cartesian extreme below human nature, below praxis, into sheer nature, into natural fallacy, any more than you want to go to the other extreme of speculation into some purity spiral beyond nature into the universal God or whatever, that knows no difference between people. Okay, let's put. Do we have our? I'm going to put the link in again. We're getting near a good time limit, but if somebody comes along, I'll stretch it out a little longer. Stephen James says, if this isn't feasible, I could swap the orchard for a very large indoor pool. If this isn't feasible, I could be chief stud in charge of impregnating all ladies without child above the age of 24. What do you think? No thanks, Stephen St. James. What are you, a wise guy? That's it's one very important takeaway. I think, speaking for myself, part of the anxiety about wanting to date a lot of women had to do with really a highly refractory way of trying to see to the borders and boundaries of our people. I mean, highly refractory. Once I finally latched onto that concept as being the issue at hand, then you can settle on the idea of really focusing on the Zen master holding up his single finger, one. That is, one woman should be enough. And you should be careful about that choice so that you wouldn't want to share her with anybody. and she not wanting to share you with anybody else. And you should be happy to explore this life, which isn't that long anyway, together. Um, so I'm not really sympathetic, no, to your wish for a harem. Oh, Gilbert, thank you for reminding me of about the discussion between Fuentes and what's his name, the Jolly Heretic. Um, and these guys are pretty amazing. Whether I talked about Keith Woods last time and Nick Fuentes, precocious as all get out. Really, amazing mental faculties and capacity to read and orchestrate these different facts that they have at hand, for their age especially. Uh, and it would seem to contradict my point to say that for the fact that he's being penalized for it, but nevertheless, um, it seems to me that a big part of the reason why someone like Nick Fuentes would achieve his celebrity is because he is calling himself and going by uh, identity as a Catholic. That is to say, under the Abrahamic yoke. That's the way he, to the extent that he gets away with what he does. That's how he does. He's a paleocon, in a word, which is controlled opposition. Now, controlled is has one of these ambiguities that I like and the STEM people wouldn't like, because you're controlled opposition in the sense that you're not necessarily doing the controlling. You might, some controlled opposition is, it's doing the controlling. Other controlled opposition is you are being controlled. He is being controlled by his adherence to Catholicism. He says that this has been like the great defender against kosher imposition. Well, not necessarily. you know, he's satisfied that he's made a great argument there, and his Catholic overlords and their overlords in turn are happy to have him believe that. That's enough said. He's a paleocon, and that's controlled opposition. Not the only one, and Keith Woods is a bit more a muted expression with his third position. His third position there. But again, that's another variant of what they would want and how they control opposition is by people like Keith Woods arguing against this characterology of the left and introducing right-wing elements through third positionism, which are rigid and therefore manipulable and prone to divide and conquer among Europeans, for some of the tenets that Svitra does either, uh, and also prone to infiltration, where they include the Abrahamic stuff. Because they don't, in that regard, they don't exclude on a genetic basis. Francis will always have a following among Tradcat incels. Yeah, he's going to have a following definitely, and partly because he's very intelligent too. He's a compelling speaker who has things to say. It's just that too bad. It's like here's the thing is like like the same in regard to him and guest worker and Bowery. A lot of these people, a lot of these right wingers. In contrast to me, is that these guys you have to be really as smart and as logical as they are to be as stupid as they are. They're able to rationalize things and maneuver and logically juggle their way around things that they shouldn't be doing that with. They're therefore not at the very basis giving certain issues the gravity that they should. And like a Bower and a guest worker, it's like they're really, in the case of the boomers, not for instance, the boomer STEM types in particular, their not only was their generational position an advantage to them personally, very profitable, and especially as a STEM person, it could be very lucrative. But then they would be seeing the red-caped, the abuses of the humanities, and be overly prone to see that is to say the humanities, as the problem. They'll call sociology the problem. Not saying that it's the abuse of something like sociology that's the problem. And they'll want to see, the answer is their scientism. Well, it's always worked for me. And they don't want to know that their scientism and their selfishness and their social irresponsibility and imperviousness has really been a big part of the problem. Whereas someone like me, who doesn't have that kind of mathematical, logical aptitude, is more verbal, perhaps, or something. I hope that I have some compensatory aptitudes. Anyway, I'm not able to patch up obsolete modernist technology the way a Bowery or a guest worker or even a Fuentes is. To patch up obsolete technology that should not be patched up because it is obsolete. Okay. Let me. I'll add the link one more time. Anybody wants to join me? So that's, I mean, but that's a reflection on their judgment. It was to say, it's like, I don't know, I've never known anybody who wasn't some combination of intelligent and stupid. And, well, because some of these logical types, these STEM types, they're taken for granted. It's a big advantage to there's a big advantage in the objectivist basis that both right wingers and liberals take for granted. You're not. You can rest on a sort of foundational idea that things are the way they are because somehow they have to be that way, and then you can kind of rationalize your way and negotiate around less profound issues, not having to grapple with that deeply ambiguous level of, well, social construction. Again, people, they don't want to understand the purpose and the profundity of social constructionism as it's meant in service of European peoples to stave off the ravages of modernity, its imperviousness to our inherent forms, in its call for change and experimentation to no end, with this faith that it will lead to not only in progress but to perfect foundation. Whereas this, as if there's something necessarily insufficient about our nature, about our inherited forms. Might be, and not just inherited forms, but generally speaking, species have this selfish genetic makeup that seeks to preserve our kinds, and that's a nature that we should want to rhyme with. The preservation of our species. Having survived some 40,000 years, I don't think that I'm alone in believing that we are worth defending, and that we cannot allow little white kids to come into a world where they're demonized and threatened and told that they are lesser and no good. And subject to the kind of violence that, and a media that's so egregious that it won't even report on it, or will quickly bury these stories while making an endless melodrama about the accidental killing of a black. That is supposed to justify, burning down cities and looting all kinds of stores. I hear Patrick saying, "Oh well, I don't care if they loot the corporations." Well, why should they have this stuff? There's maybe, okay, the corporations shouldn't be profiting or something. You don't care if the corporations suffer, but there's like a lot of parts of the chain of production that our people are part of and dependent on. It's not that we can't change, of course, the arrangements of the corporations and whatnot, but it's like, why should they be able to do this? No, Patrick. Any comments on the Russia-Ukraine situation, Daniel? Let's see. That's a sad situation to me. And Gilbert might not like my take on this, but I believe that Ukraine is perhaps a more muted, less overt part of Operation Clean Break for Israel. Victoria Nuland was in there early on, installing political figures. And she is married to Robert Kagan, who was one of the authors of Operation Clean Break. And my friends who know the situation, well, one was Ukrainian and one was Belarusian, but they're living in Russia and identify as Russian. And of course, we met in Ukraine, and they agree with my assessment that most of the mayors and presidents, and the president rather, are kosher in Ukraine, and set up. The whole Maidan operation, to begin with, wasn't acting like European peoples act. European peoples don't act with that kind of aggression and vigor. It was an AstroTurf thing. It was a kosher thing. And it's not to say that Ukrainians don't have a wish for independence and autonomy from Russia. They do. But not with that kind of pro-Western liberal concern as the ultimate end, but rather for a sovereign ethno-national Ukraine. And of course, kosher liberalism of the West would be taking advantage of that on one side. And I'm not sympathetic to the Russian side either, and don't believe that they're free of kosher entanglements on their end either. I'm sorry about it. I see white people I both like. I like the Russians. I like the Ukrainians. fighting each other, and I mean, what would Ukraine be fighting for if they were to join with Europe, so that they could be like France, and that their beautiful women could be given to Africans? I mean, it's like, oh boy, just what we need, right? I, you know, a lot of a lot of Jewish guys marry, or they impregnate Ukrainian women. What was the ranging from prostitutes to poor women to just like beautiful, well-educated Ukrainian women. But the point being that the father is Jewish and the mother is Ukrainian, so they don't have quite the inroad to membership in the kosher tribe. So where do they go? More conveniently, the Ukraine, and that would be one practical aspect of kosher interest in Ukraine. But also, Ukraine it has all that fertile farmland. People want it for the same reason that Hitler wanted it. Hitler didn't want Poland; he wanted Ukraine. That's what he's going for. But I think it's sad. I still think it's sad that Crimea has gone to Russia. Although maybe you could say that it belongs in the hands of the Tartars. They were even before. And Eastern Ukraine, that's where most of the victims of the Holodomor were. The Ukrainian victims of the Holodomor, which was Victoria Nuland's husband's other Kagan relative, right, Robert Kaganovich, was behind that, or principal behind that. And so, for people to say that this area is inhabited by Russians anyway is a bit cruelly ignoring the history of how it became more Russian than Ukrainian. These areas, northern Ukraine and south of the Pripyat Marshes, are profound to European peoples as a place of some of our oldest civilization and the wellspring of some of our genetic kinds. So it's quite upsetting to me, and and it's complicated. And then there's the mix-up with the Bandera types in Western Ukraine, who were Nazi sympathizers. They were so anti-Russian, and pretty much remain so. They were so anti-Russian that this is more like in Lvov than in Kiev, Western Ukraine. They were so anti-Russian and so anti-Polish that they identified with the Nazis. Not that this did them a great service in the end, but it had them murdering Polish civilians, men, women, and children, whole towns, and of course fighting alongside Nazism against Russians and Jews as well. So that's a gnarly bunch and a gnarly identity that's associated there in Western Ukraine, which complicates things. And it's a bit sad that they have this beautiful city of Lvov associated with that stuff. Although I wouldn't, even though the Poles built that city, as far as I know, I wouldn't want to continue that fight between the Poles and the Ukrainians for that city. Let's leave it Ukrainian. But when you do visit Lvov, you see Western influence. As corrupt as it is, as neoliberal as it is, the times that I've been there, it's kind of nice. It really is. I have some. I show some videos on my channel. I take you on a tour around Lvov. I haven't been to Eastern Ukraine. So anyway, I think that I don't favor the West stoking up this conflict. I don't think that it has to be part of NATO, although, yeah, I don't think so. I don't think that it has to be part of NATO. I think that we can use a soft westernizing approach to make for friendly relations between a friendly backing that's supportive of their ethno-nation, and which can also work to make for a more felicitous relation with Russia. I don't know. I see the neocon influence in there, as coming from the likes of Victoria Nuland as the problem. So that's my opinion on Ukraine and the conflict with Russia. I don't think the Ukrainians want to fight, but there is like definitely an independent streak in Russia, which sees itself as its people as different from Russia and different from Poland. And there's some bad blood from the brutal murderous actions back and forth between Poles and Ukrainians that we have to be careful not to trigger. Okay, so that's enough said about that. One more time, the link, if anybody. No longer for NATO to be extended up to Russia's borders. It is an anachronistic legacy of the Cold War. I suppose, but I'm not ready to trust the European nations to be without some oversight from America either. Uh, there's some really mean dispositions between various European nations. Um, I'm not happy about American troops being sent to Poland. I mean, that means a lot of the homies coming here, I guess. Well, no, they say they're mostly Air Force. It's not going to be too many. But I'm never happy about having a lot of Americans of any kind here. Okay, so I'm gonna give it another 4 minutes, but this has been a stream in which I've said things uh, that are a worthwhile source, so I won't take it down. And Russia, while it might not be a threat to Western Europe directly, is even a threat to them to some extent with their oil stuff, with their oil pipeline, and they've been more than a threat to Belarus. They've kind of people don't even recognize the difference of that nation to this day. Now, it's true in some sort of condescending way they might be better off than, you know, under the rubric of Lukashenko, even than suffering the westernization. Oh my God, of a place like France or Belgium or Holland. I mean, that's the real nightmare. Although some individual people you wouldn't believe, uh, not just there's been murders. I've known people in Belarus who've been beaten for hours for protesting Lukashenko's rigged elections. It's no joke, and obviously Ukraine is having its problems too. But no, I don't favor putting NATO in there. Um, I wouldn't necessarily withdraw them from Poland though. Um, anyway, the idea of unity among European peoples is not very useful given the ongoing conflict. Well, unity, coordination is the aim. You don't want them, shouldn't want them to be unified in the name of preservation of our different kinds. Uh, I think the nation state is optimal, is an optimal unit of power. Tribes are too small, and you know, one big Richard Spencer unification of Europe is not a good idea either. If you're going to try to manage accountability in some kind of ecological approximation. All right, I'm going to wait a few more minutes to see if anybody else wants to join me. Anybody else wants to join me? And this is pretty good because then I'll still have some hours left on StreamYard. For this month, so we'll be able to do one or two more shows. Am I doing anything to celebrate Black History Month? Yes, I'm celebrating the fact that I live in a place where they're not, and it's wonderful. It's better than I could imagine. The history of the world is largely defined by conflict between various colonial powers. Well, Gilbert, some people might blame and with valid explanation that imperialism on kosher influence, at least to a large extent, whether by religion or by finance. Have you said Her Majesty the Queen your congratulations on her 70-year anniversary on the British throne? No, I don't. I really don't. I don't. Aesthetically, I like the monarchy, but listen to the Queen Elizabeth and her anti-racist talk, and it's just like she's just way too liberal. I don't know how. It's almost as if she doesn't care about her people. I mean, and then that son of hers, or that grandson of hers, rather, Harry. What a disgrace! 7 years today. God save the Queen. Well, whatever. Yeah. What was else in the news? Oh, so I was saying that the hermeneutic survey could move from. It doesn't have to be riveted. The kosher folks might be 1A in their niche power. Then our own vulnerabilities through our right wingers and liberals on the basis of objectivism that they are accountable to their selfish interests and not to our group to which they're truly indebted. And then moving on to Islamic terrorism or black biopower and its hyper assertiveness and aggression. And, or the position of the pure all female position within the disorder of modernity, its one-upness, its acting as gatekeepers of liberalism because it serves its short-term interests and is pandered to from all directions with the Locketean prohibition of borders and weaponization thereof in the form of anti-racism. And then moving to, the corporate, which is another right-wing exploitation, to the Flu World Order, destroying the middle class and upward mobility, and continuing its modernist experimentation on us. So it's not stuck. Systemic maintenance in hermeneutic survey and this white postmodern survey allows this fluidity and dexterity in looking after problematic interfaces where they are. There's one thing. I mean, I don't like any of them, but there's one thing that I did like about Charles, um, when he and I thought was very appropriate for uh, a prince or a royalty to take on as an issue when he began complaining about the ugliness of modern architecture. That I thought was an appropriate issue for him to address the ugly modern architecture in London that had been displacing some of the traditional architecture. Okay, here comes the link. Last time, I'm taking a 1 minute break. I'll come back, and if there's nobody here that wants to join me, we'll close down the show for today. Okay, so we've got Cooper Cup at wide receiver and Stafford at quarterback. A surprising white combination at wide receiver there. Um, and most of the offense for the Rams is white. Most of the defense is black. But the team is half white and half black, exactly. I counted. It's the same as it was in 1979 when they were in the Super Bowl against the Steelers way back. So, almost worth rooting for, but not really. It's not worth supporting uh, Black Ball and the white cocks in the stands. But um, there's some uh, excuse in rooting for individual white players, I think. So I will watch this Super Bowl and root for Cooper Cup, but I don't plan to make a habit out of it, and I think that basically we want to boycott this these sports which make celebrities out of and millionaires out of and supply them with harems and adulation for what? Not doing us any good. Okay, so there's the link. We do have a gay Archbishop of Canterbury. Is he gay, that guy? Those guys, the Anglicans, they don't have to be celibate, do they? Like the Catholics do. I don't know how this works. I don't think that the Catholics would love to be practicing sexually in any way. Doesn't matter. It's all any form of Christianity is bullocks as far as I'm concerned. Well, we have 4 listeners. The link is there if anybody wants to join me. Otherwise, I'll be back next Sunday at latest. I'll try to bring Per onto a discussion with me one day. And he's really intelligent, good Swedish guy who's largely in alignment with my views. He is very much against those who would try to associate our cause with Hitler and Holocaust denial. He's not some fool who believes in Christianity and thinks that we need that either. And at the same time, like me, he's fully wise to the kosher question. And then you need to recognize them as other and keep them at bay as other without calling for, without revenge, without prioritizing any calls to that we have to look after ourselves and chart our autonomous way forward. I'll see if I can get him on here. Stephen St. James, who do you have positive things to say about in the dissident sphere, Daniel? Serious question. I think that I can't think of any of them that aren't don't have a good measure of intelligence and some things to say. It's just they're all operating within a framework, and they all have problems. Operating within a provided framework, a box they can't get out of. I think I was thinking the other day that there's some that are closer to my worldview than others. Who do I dislike the least? Let me think about that, and I'll answer next show. Who's the least not beyond the pale? Who was it? Let me think. Some people start to sound good, and then they disappoint me. Like Nick Gilvey was sounding almost good, and then not. Definitely not. Oh. they're all pretty much on par, and I find them all talented, having things to say, but ultimately wanting, not lacking philosophically. Even some of the better ones, like Greg Johnson, are not what he should be. Not top ranking philosophically. Really smart, and definitely in some ways doing things that I can't do, but no, can't fully endorse him. Any thoughts on British contingent academic agent? I talked quite a bit about academic agent earlier in the show. You must have come late. This Iranian guy with an English mother. As a Johnny come lately, he's very problematic with his idea of the boomer truth regime. Bothers me a lot. Listen back to the earlier part of the show. I'm not going to take this down, and I'm not going to repeat myself. I talked quite a bit about him. And there's that other English guy. What is it? Iron Duke. He was completely enveloped in the Gottfried box of the left as the enemy, foolishly, and thinks that Colin Liddell is really on the up and up. And Colin Liddell is, maybe because he's being, he knows where his bread is buttered, doesn't want to. Is drawn this false either or. And he's way too kosher. He's even got glow in the darks there, like Brett Stevens. It's terrible what he's doing, and what was he saying in this recent discussion? Colin Liddell was saying, "You're either a Nazi who thinks the Jews are to blame for everything, or you are just a normal guy like him who sees them as having some problematic people, but really the problem is mostly us and whatever, the left and liberalism." It's awful. And it's awful because Colin Liddell is such an intelligent guy in some ways. I mean, I'm interested to hear his podcast. Like Richard Spencer, he'll nerd his way around like a lot of ideas and have some interesting angles. But he doesn't have the proper framework as I do. I was listening to Richard Spencer and Mark Brahman, and I think that they're lifting some ideas of mine and trying to graft them as their own. But they're still reconstructing the problem basically in their kind of Nietzschean supremacist outlook that has been part and parcel of our misdirection and hubris and downfall all along. Again, it's like with the rest of them, for want of Aristotle. Now, you can criticize Aristotle, and it's got to be neo-Aristotelian if it's going to be any good, for lacking the imagination that, say, the forms of Plato. would uphold or would propose, but this is what hermeneutics does uh, in the postmodern turn. This is where hermeneutics picks up the slack and to transform our cause into a neo-Aristotelianism that has the teleology of emergentism, but also the rigor and imagination of, uh, of hermeneutics. And I think that that's a good place to wrap up. Big Midge is probably our only hope, but I stand by my case for backing Bonds for the time being. Or Boris. Or Nigel Farage and Boris. He's always been like a kind of libertarian kind of bankers guy. Austrian school fuckhead. And Boris, forget about it. I had some communications with his office when he was the mayor of London. Oh, that's nothing. But well, Boris, not as bad as Tony Blair, I guess. Oh, Tony Blair, Sir Tony Blair, Jesus, what a nightmare. A pea in a pod with Clinton, right? Pandering to puerile women, puerile girls, rather. Ugh. Let's open the borders so the conservatives can never win again. Good thinking, Sir Tony. Would it be electrocuted in Minecraft? Yeah, well, the UK does have a shit sandwich. I really am. My fight is on behalf of the native English as much as anybody. I believe that England should be for the English. All of our European countries have a small percentage, 1, 2, 3% of other Europeans for the most part. Tiny, tiny percentage of Asians, less than 0.5%. It's okay. But that's the way it should be. Ultimately. But as the political channels and other channels are not available to us now, that's why we have to organize our genus and species in virtual realm now, online, through the DNA Nations. Okay, so 15 more seconds, and that will make for exactly a 3-hour show. Thank you, everybody, for joining me, and I'll talk to you next Sunday at latest. Bye for now. Go Cooper Cup.